New Directions for Women presents From Addiction to Recovery, Inspirational Stories of Courage.
Hi, my name is Erica, and I'm an addict and alcoholic. And I was born and raised in Texas. I grew up in a little town in McAllen, and then lived there the majority of my life. Always was a really good student, had 3 older sisters. My parents are still married. We were the type of family every Sunday went to church. My parents always talked about God. My sisters were, like everyone else, we had a close relationship, but you fight because you're sisters. But my childhood, I don't have any like horrible things that have happened but I think the things that led me to like maybe drinking the first time was I always played sports growing up, and I always had a bunch of friends, but I never felt like I was a part of any one of those groups. Like I had my basketball friends, I had my friends that I hung out with, all the different groups I could fit into, but I never felt like part of it really. And so one time after basketball practice, I was walking home with one of my friends to her house, and across the street was like this field, and we were walking through there to get to her house, and she was like, "Hey, one of my friends gave me a joint." And I was like, "What is that?" And she was like, "You want to try it?" And I was like, "Okay." And so we smoked a joint, and we went back to her house and like ate everything in it and laughed and danced and had so much fun. And for the first time, I felt like nothing mattered and like everything was okay. Because from the outside looking in, people probably thought everything was always okay. But inside, I never felt like a part of, like I said, and I always felt out of place and awkward or weird or not popular enough, not pretty enough, like all of those different things. And so after I smoked that joint for the first time, I was like, "Oh, that was nice." But I had tried wine coolers before because I have 3 older sisters, and I would find like wine coolers under their bed and try it, and like be like, "Ooh, that was fun." But it was never like I didn't do it all the time or something. But it was after I smoked that joint that I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was a lot of fun." So I started smoking pot more, and that school year ended, and it was the summer before I was a sophomore, I believe. And before, yes, it was the summer before I was a sophomore, and one of my friends had pills, rohibinols, and they were like, "I know you smoke pot, but you want to try these? They're like drinking without having to drink so much, So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll try it." And so I took a rohibinol or a couple or whatever. I loved it. I don't remember anything of that night. And my friends told me the next day all the things I did, and I was so embarrassed and like, "Don't ever tell me anything I do again." But I loved the feeling of, I didn't know what happened. I just know that I felt like I had fun and like it was fun. And that whole summer, that's all I did was rohibinols and any kind of pill that my friends had. And after that, like it was off and running. I had always been really good at basketball. And when I was a freshman, I was already starting like playing with the varsity. But my sophomore year, because of that summer before it, I hardly ever, I blew off basketball. I would miss practices. I would just do horrible. I ended up, the school I went to most of my life, it was very, very, very strict. And you couldn't dye your hair. If you wear a skirt, it had to be to your knee. Very strict. Always had to tuck in your shirt. Anyway, you couldn't dye your hair. But I was like, I didn't care. I was, popping pills, smoking pot. So I dyed my hair and I got a piercing, and I went to school and they put me in ISS, in school suspension, because they were like, "You can't be here like this." And so I stayed in ISS for a while, and my basketball coach came and was like, "Erica, you can't play basketball if you're in ISS." And I was like, "Well, I don't care." And he was like, "You were one of my top players. Like, you're going to, ruin your whole season and your future. You could possibly have like a really good future in basketball." I didn't care. I messed up that whole time. I stayed in ISS for a while, finally colored my hair back because my mom was embarrassed because she actually worked at that school. So finally for her, I colored my hair, took out the piercing. One weekend, I was staying with one of my friends, and we took her mom's car. This is all in my sophomore year. took her mom's car and drove it to South Padre Island. We all got trashed, and it was during a school day when we skipped school, so we got arrested at South Padre Island for truancy, and we got taken in handcuffs back to school. My mom worked there at the time, so she was so embarrassed. We're all handcuffed together in the office, and after that I was pretty much like, I got kicked out of that school. So then I went to this other school, which was more of like a public school, and so you could do whatever you want, and that's when things got even crazier. I got introduced to every drug in the world. And so in the interim of all this, I had been put into rehab a couple times because my parents would find marijuana, my parents would find different things, and their solution was obviously like, we need to get her help. So I would go to rehab all the time, but I'd get out and just do the same thing over and over because I was like 14, 15 years old, you know? I didn't care. Anyway, I did horrible at that school that I went to, the second one. Got kicked out of that school, got put into a learning center, got kicked out of the learning center for selling drugs. And then everything even got worse after that. I don't know how I finished like school, to be honest. Actually, I ended up, after getting kicked out of the learning center, I got my GED because I got arrested for some stuff while I was like on drugs. I got arrested. My parents were like, you need to get out of here. You need to get your GED, at least do something, and you need to move and get out of this place, because they thought the geographical was the problem. It wasn't me, it was the friends I was hanging out with. So I got my GED and I moved to San Antonio. And that was even better because I didn't have parents watching me. I moved in with my 3 older sisters who were busy with college and actually doing life. And I met a new group of people who were doing a lot of things that I had already done, but were like, had their own apartments and had their own stuff. And so life just got even crazier. I was doing heroin all the time. I was stealing from my sisters, my parents, people, anything, just to get money to buy drugs. And that went on for years. And I was, in all of this time, I was continuously going to rehab for different things. I'd get arrested. My parents would get me an attorney and say, you know, the attorney would be like, go to rehab so we can get this taken care of and you don't get the charges drop, you know, all these different things. So in and out of rehab forever until I was 20 years old. And my last year of using, well, for a long time I wanted to quit, but I just couldn't. I didn't know how. I didn't want to get sick, you know what I mean, from stopping heroin or stopping pills. And so I was miserable though. I tried to kill myself all the time and it never worked. When I was 20, I ended up in my bedroom shooting up, and then I used to have these, I had a Renaissance knife on my vanity, and I was like, you know what, God, I'm sick of living like this. I don't know how to stop using, but I don't want to keep living. And so I did some heroin, took a bunch of pills, and I grabbed that knife and I went into the closet and I stabbed myself 3 times in the stomach. And I normally don't tell that story, but I think that it helps people, you know, because that's how far down I went. I ended up getting taken to the hospital. My sister, poor thing, is the one that found me in the closet. And so they took me into the hospital. A lot of stuff happened in that time. All I remember is I woke up and, in the hospital, I was so messed up on drugs that I just remember hearing things. And they were like, we don't even need to, like, put any, like, give her anything to suture her up and all this stuff. She's already so, you know, medicated. But I remember the surgeon holding my hand, and this is one of the only things I remember before I, like, later on. He was holding my hand, and he looked at me and he goes, why would somebody so young and so beautiful want to kill themselves? And I remember looking at him thinking, if he only knew, like, how empty and dead I already feel inside. And so I don't remember anything after that. I woke up to my mom holding my hand, crying, and this is weird because I never listened to country at that time, but I opened my eyes that morning and the sun was just coming up and the blinds of my room were just a little bit open, and I looked up and I saw the sun like coming up. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm alive. Okay, God, like there's a purpose. You know, I woke up and I looked at my mom crying, and I thought this stupid country song came in my head when I was thinking all this. And it was like, is there life out there so much she hasn't done? Is there life beyond her family and her friends? I guess like a Reba McEntire song. And at that moment, I told my mom I wanted help. And I wanted to try and see if I could live clean. And she couldn't believe I was saying this. It was the first time I'd ever asked to go to treatment. So she called this place, Laha. I went there for 30 days, and I had been through there so many times before that they told me, Erica, you need to go to this place in California. It's called New Directions for Women. You've been through our program too many times. I think this place is the place you need to be. And I did it. I thought, why not give it a shot, you know? Because what else could happen, you know? Obviously, God's not going to take me because I've tried so many times. So I flew out to California. I didn't know anyone or anything. And I did New Directions for Women for 90 days. And that place literally saved my life. And it was the first time I had friends that, like, cared about me and that I felt a part of. And that, like, didn't want anything from me. We weren't using each other for some reason. It was just genuinely, we cared about each other, you know? And I'm not going to say I was the best client. I tried to leave 1,000 times. I did horrible things in there, got in trouble all the time. But those girls always talked me out of leaving, always had my back. And I learned for the first time that I could live and, like, be clean. And I remember going, New Directions used to take us out to meetings, and I remember going to the Newport Club, and I was amazed that, like, we were in this meeting and it was so packed of people my age that people were sitting on the floor because it was so full. And I was like, oh my God, like, I've never seen this before. Like, in Texas, people aren't getting clean and sober. Like, they probably are, but I didn't know anyone that was, especially at the age of 20. And to be in this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's so big that people are sitting on the floor, I was like, this is the place I need to be. And so I ended up staying in California. I finished my 90 days at New Directions. I moved into their sober living. I did that for a while. And then I ended up starting school again at OCC, and I stayed clean and sober out here for like a little over 4 years. But then some family stuff happened, and I ended up having to move back to Texas. And so I moved back to Texas, and I got into SMU in Dallas. And I stayed clean and sober there for a while. But then I started thinking, oh God, I'm older now. You know, when I got clean, I was 20. Now I'm almost 25. Like, maybe I can drink, because, like, drinking was never really, like, my thing. And so I relapsed and I was drinking. And I was going to SMU for undergrad for clinical psychology. And I was partying all the time again. By God's grace, I finished undergrad. But I also started doing heroin again. So one of my friends that was actually one of the girls that I went to New Directions with found out I was doing heroin and called my parents and told them, Erica's doing heroin and, you know, she needs help. So at that time, I had just gotten into grad school in Malibu at Pepperdine. And my parents were like, Erica, like, do you want help? And I was like, yes, I do. And so I ended up coming back to California. And I went to New Directions again to get clean. I used to go there all the time and just visit whenever I'd had a really bad day, because that was like my little safe haven. And I remember being there one day, and I was in grad school, and I was like, Maurice, I don't know if I could do this. This is so hard, and, like, I'm stressed out all the time. And he was like, you could do this. And he's like, and I'm going to tell you, if you finish this program, you will have a job here. And I was like, yeah, right. Anyway, years ago, I finish, I do my practicum. New Directions allows me to do my practicum with them. So I finished my practicum hours with New Directions. And then all my friends from the MFT, Marriage and Family Therapy program, were freaking out because they were like, how are we going to get a job after practicum, applying all these places? And what was awesome is I didn't even have to. I finished my practicum, and Maurice was like, you're hired. And I worked at New Directions as a therapist for a couple years. And then I'd been there for a while, and I was like, you know what, like, I kind of want to try other things. So then I ended up quitting New Directions, but was always still part of it. I still go to alumni on Thursdays. I'm still friends with a lot of people that have gone through the program and that work here, like Tanya Victoria. And I don't know. And now I am still currently a therapist, but I'm not working in a treatment center at this time. I'm just, I still want to be in the treatment like field, so I have a sober living, and I love that. But basically, that's my story.
How much time do you have now?
Well, this is another horrible thing. A little over 2 years ago, I was going through a lot of stuff, just personal things, family issues again with just stuff at home, and a lot of things going on in my life. And I ended up drinking, and that was like for a couple months. And then I was like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I worked my butt off to get my, become a marriage and family therapist and put myself through all of that school. I could lose everything, you know? And I ended up getting pulled over and got a DUI after a couple months of drinking. And in jail, I was like, this is not worth it for drinking. I can lose everything in my life. This is crazy. And the life that I had and have is amazing to anything I've ever had before, you know, before I was 20. And so the next day when I got out of jail, so embarrassing, is my new sobriety date. And so now I have a little over 2 years. I keep coming back, because my life is amazing when I'm sober and clean. I know you hear it in meetings all the time, and when I first got clean and sober, I used to be like, oh God, it's so cliche, and I used to roll my eyes when people would say, you know, my worst day sober is still better than my best day high or messed up. And I used to think, that is so crap. Come on. I had some pretty good times when I was using, but it finally hit me, that is true. There is nothing in the world when I'm sober and clean that is worse, do you know what I mean, than when I'm out there. Because it's I lose everything. And it's not even talking about material things, it's talking about that hole inside of me that I had all of those years before I got clean when I was 20, comes back in an instant.
And what's your relationship like with your family?
Oh my God, they're my rock. My family my mom is my best friend in the whole world. My sisters, I would do anything in the world for. And that's because before, they wouldn't talk to me before, when I was 20, you know? Because they never believed I was, really gonna stay sober and clean. But now they've seen my life and all the things I've done, and it's amazing. My family is everything to me. Even if you fall, you don't have to stay down. And really take every day that you have sober and clean, don't take it for granted. Because it is true, no matter how much time you have, you could lose it in an instant. Because I've had time, like I said before, 4 years, 4.5 years, and then I lost it because I thought I could drink, you know, and then 6 years, 6.5 years, thought I could, whatever. What I'm saying is that and even when I've fallen, I've always, with God's grace, been able to pick myself up and know that I can get back into the program and have those people hold me up until I'm strong again. And so I guess my message would just be, don't give up if you fall. Remember how amazing it is when you're standing.
If you or a loved one are suffering from addiction, please call our caring admissions counselors today at 1-800-93-WOMEN. That's 1-800-939-6636.